Hey, thanks for clicking. This is Buddy Chronicle. So, a man spends 35 years building everything from nothing, and the one person who was supposed to stand beside him spends the last 3 of those years quietly burning it all down. Stay with me until the end. This one is going to hit you somewhere deep. Your Honor, I need to stop this proceeding. My daughter's voice cut through the conference room like a blade. She was standing near the back wall. In the gray blazer she wore to job interviews, holding a manila folder thick enough to choke on. 26 years old. Calm in a way that scared me, because I had never seen her look like that before. The mediator, a thin man named Hargrove who smelled faintly of coffee and bureaucracy, looked up from his paperwork with genuine irritation. "Ma'am, this is a private session. You cannot just—" "I'm the daughter of the respondent." She walked forward without being invited, "and I have documentation of financial fraud, deliberate asset concealment, and a coordinated plan to have my father declared legally incompetent so my mother could seize sole control of everything he owns." The room went completely still. My wife was sitting across the table from me. We had not spoken a civil word in 4 months. She was dressed in cream, composed, pearl earrings, the picture of the wronged spouse. She had her lawyer on one side and a legal pad full of handwritten notes on the other. When my daughter spoke, the color drained out of her face so fast it looked like someone had pulled a plug. "That is absolutely not true." Her voice cracked on the last word. My daughter opened the folder. "I think it is. And I think you knew I had this, which is why you pushed so hard to move the mediation date up by 6 weeks. She looked at me then. Just for a second. "Dad, I'm sorry this took so long. I need to go back to the beginning, because none of this will make sense if I don't. My name is not important. What matters is this. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a structural engineer for a mid-sized construction firm outside Columbus, Ohio. Not glamorous work, but honest work. The kind that leaves calluses on your hands even when you spend most of your day behind a desk reviewing load calculations and site reports. I retired 18 months ago with a pension, a 401k. I had been feeding like a garden for 3 decades, and what I believed was a solid marriage. I met my wife in 1989 at a conference in Cincinnati. She was working in hotel event management at the time, 24 years old, with a laugh that filled whatever room she was in. I was 28, freshly promoted, awkward in the way that engineers often are in social situations. We dated for 2 years, married in 1991, bought a house in Westerville, had our daughter in 1998 and our son in 2001. For a long time, it was a real marriage. I believed that. I want to be clear about that because I have spent many nights in the last year asking myself if I was blind or stupid or both. But I do not think I was blind. I think I was trusting. There is a difference, even if it does not always feel like one. The changes started somewhere around 2019. Small things at first. My wife began taking long drives on Saturday afternoons that she described as clearing her head. She started keeping her phone face down on every surface in the house. She joined a fitness studio that charged more per month than our first car payment and went 4 evenings a week without apparent results, at least none I could see. She began having opinions about things she had never cared about before: wine regions, weekend getaways, a desire to finally live a little now that the kids were grown. I told myself it was a phase, retirement approaching, the children out of the house, a woman reclaiming identity. I read an article about it online and felt briefly reassured and then forgot about it. The memory thing started in 2021. It was subtle. My wife would tell me she had mentioned something, a dinner reservation, a phone call from her sister, a check she needed me to sign, and I would have no memory of it. At first I dismissed it. I was 61. People forget things at 61. But it kept happening. She would look at me with this expression, patient and faintly worried, and say something like, "Honey, we talked about this on Thursday. Don't you remember?" And I would stand there searching my memory for a Thursday conversation that did not exist. I started writing things down, keeping a small notebook on the kitchen counter. Dates, conversations, decisions. My wife thought it was a good idea, encouraged it, even. Bought me a nicer notebook. Told our daughter, in a phone call she did not know I partially overheard, that she was worried about my memory and had been for a while. My daughter flew home from Denver the following weekend. She did not say why. Just showed up with a casserole and a bottle of wine and spent 2 days watching everything with eyes I did not recognize at the time as calculating. I thought she was visiting. I did not know she had come home to investigate. What she found over the following 14 months would have destroyed me if I had known about it all at once. I am grateful, in a way I cannot fully explain, that she chose to carry most of it alone until the time was right. My daughter had always been sharp with numbers. She got that from me, or so I like to think. When she was in college, she used to review my tax returns just for fun, the way other kids did crossword puzzles. In the spring of 2022, she asked if she could help me organize my financial documents since I was approaching retirement and things would get more complicated. I said yes. It seemed like kindness. It was not kindness. Or rather, it was not only kindness. She had noticed something during that overheard phone call. The way my wife had said she had been worried about my memory for a while. My daughter told me later that something in the phrasing felt rehearsed. Too precise, like someone laying groundwork rather than expressing concern. She started with the bank statements. What she found there sent her to the brokerage accounts. What she found there sent her to the home equity line of credit I did not know we had opened. What she found there sent her quietly and without telling anyone to a lawyer of her own. Over the course of 14 months, my daughter documented the following. My wife had been moving money from our joint accounts into a personal account opened in her name only in a bank 2 towns over. Not large amounts at any one time. $2,000 here, $4,500 there. Small enough to look like ordinary household transactions to anyone not paying close attention. Added together over 3 years, the total was just under $220,000. She had taken a home equity line against our house, forging my signature on the application. The balance drawn against that line was $160,000. I did not know the account existed. The statements went to a P.O. box I had never heard of. She had cashed out a portion of my brokerage account, citing a financial hardship provision that required both signatures. My signature on those documents was not mine. And then there was the man she had been seeing since 2020. My daughter found out about him 6 months into her investigation through a combination of phone records she had legal access to as a co-account holder on a family plan and a credit card statement that showed repeated charges at a restaurant in a town 40 minutes from our house on the same evenings. My wife said she was at the fitness studio. His name was not important then, and it is not important now. What mattered was that he was younger, that he worked in financial services, and that he appeared to have helped my wife structure the account transfers in a way that would be difficult to trace. He had expertise in exactly the kind of instruments she had used. That was not a coincidence. But none of that was the worst part. The worst part was what my daughter found in a folder on my wife's laptop, which my wife had left logged in on the kitchen table one morning while she went to walk the dog. My daughter was visiting for a weekend. She was alone in the kitchen for 11 minutes. She did not plan it. But she recognized an opportunity, and she used it. The folder contained drafts of letters. Letters to our family doctor. Letters to an attorney who specialized in elder law and guardianship proceedings. Letters that described, in clinical and careful language, a husband with declining cognitive function, a husband who forgot conversations, a husband who had become confused about finances, about dates, about details of daily life, a husband who, according to these letters, could no longer be trusted to make sound decisions about his own estate, a husband who needed someone to make those decisions for him. My wife had been manufacturing evidence of my cognitive decline for over a year. The conversations I could not remember. The appointments she told me about that I had no record of. The concerned phone call to my daughter about my memory. All of it, or most of it, was deliberate. She would tell me something and then deny she had said it. She would move objects in the house and express worry when I could not find them. She was not just stealing from me. She was building a case that I was too impaired to stop her. If she had succeeded, she could have petitioned for guardianship. With a cooperative doctor and a willing attorney, she could have taken legal control of my finances, my medical decisions, my estate. I would have had almost no recourse. A man who cannot remember conversations cannot effectively defend himself against a woman who has spent a year documenting those failures. My daughter sat with that folder open in front of her for a long time. Then she took photographs of every document with her phone, closed the laptop exactly as she had found it, and went back to reading her book before my wife came home from the walk. She did not tell me any of this. Not then. She waited. She spent the next 3 months working with her lawyer, gathering, supporting documentation, mapping the financial transfers, building a timeline. She found a forensic document examiner willing to evaluate the signature forgeries. She found a financial crime specialist who agreed to review the account structures. She hired a private investigator for 3 weeks to document the relationship with the man from the financial services firm, and what came back in that report filled 12 pages. She did not tell me because she knew me, knew that if I found out, I would confront my wife immediately, out of anger, out of hurt, out of the entirely human and entirely counterproductive impulse to demand an explanation from someone who had a lawyer and a plan and no intention of telling the truth. My daughter knew that a confrontation would tip everything over and give my wife time to move assets, destroy documents, and prepare a story. So my daughter waited until I filed for divorce. I filed in January of this year. Not because I had uncovered anything, I had not. I filed because I had spent 32 years married to a woman who had slowly, in the last few years, become a stranger who looked at me with contempt she barely bothered to hide, and I was 63 years old and tired. Whatever love had once held things together had gone somewhere I could not follow. I asked for a divorce on a Tuesday evening after dinner. My wife said okay in a tone that suggested she had been waiting for it. 2 weeks later, her lawyer contacted my lawyer with a settlement proposal that would have left me with approximately 40% of what I actually owned. She wanted a substantial portion of the retirement accounts. She wanted alimony she described as necessary given her limited employment history and the health concerns regarding my husband's current capacity. That phrase was in the first letter. Health concerns regarding my husband's current capacity. The groundwork she had laid was already becoming a weapon. I told my lawyer to hold the line. I did not know why yet. I just felt, somewhere under the anxiety and the grief of everything falling apart, that something was not right about the speed of it, about how prepared she seemed. My daughter called me the day after I received that settlement letter. She asked how I was doing. I told her I had seen the proposal. There was a pause on her end, longer than felt natural. "Dad, I need you to trust me for a little while longer." She had used those words once before, when she was 9 years old and building a surprise for my birthday that took her 3 weeks of secret planning. I had not heard them again until that phone call. Something in the way she said them made me set down every instinct to fight and simply wait. The mediation was set for April. Standard procedure, an attempt to reach an agreement without going to a full hearing. My wife arrived early. Her lawyer arrived with a rolling briefcase. The mediator arranged his folders. I sat on my side of the table and looked at the woman I had spent most of my adult life with and felt something I could not quite name. Not rage, not grief. Something quieter than either. My daughter arrived 7 minutes after the session began, having timed it. I later learned, specifically so she could not be asked to leave before she spoke, "Your Honor, I need to stop this proceeding." She laid the documents on the table one by one, naming each one as she set it down. Bank records showing the transfers. The home equity account my wife had opened without my knowledge. The brokerage liquidation documents with signatures a forensic examiner had determined were not mine. The credit card statements. The private investigator's report. And at the end, printed on plain white paper, photographs of the guardianship planning documents she had found on my wife's laptop. My wife's lawyer objected. Repeatedly. The documents were obtained improperly. The evidence was tainted. My daughter had no standing. My daughter had anticipated each objection. She had her own lawyer present by phone who addressed each challenge in turn. The bank records were obtained through legitimate means. The brokerage documents were a matter of my financial records, to which I had full legal access. The photographs from the laptop were a closer question, but the information was corroborated by independent documentation, and the matter of a potentially fraudulent guardianship petition involved criminal law, not just civil. The mediator called a recess. He came back 20 minutes later and said, with the careful neutrality of someone who has just made a very large decision, that in light of the documentation presented, he was suspending the mediation and referring the matter to the court with a recommendation that both the divorce proceedings and potential criminal conduct be reviewed by a judge. My wife did not try to run. I want to be honest about that. What she did was almost worse. She sat very still, with the expression of someone watching a bridge they spent years building collapse into a river. She did not cry. She did not yell. She looked at me across the table with something that might have been, underneath everything, recognition. And then she looked away and did not look back. The next 5 months were not clean or simple or satisfying in the way that justice is sometimes imagined to be. They were depositions and hearings and document reviews and conversations with financial investigators that lasted 4 hours and left me feeling hollowed out. They were phone calls with my son, who had known none of this and needed time to process it, who went through a period of anger at his sister for not telling him sooner, and then a longer period of something harder to define. They were nights in the house that felt enormous and silent in ways a house never feels when you have shared it with someone for decades. But the truth, once it was in front of a court, did what truth does when it has been documented carefully and completely. The judge reviewing the case referred the matter of the forged signatures to the county prosecutor's office. The financial transfers were examined by a forensic accountant appointed by the court. The guardianship planning documents were reviewed by an attorney specializing in elder law who provided a written opinion that they constituted preparation for a fraudulent legal action. The man from the financial services firm was named as a person of interest in the asset structuring. He resigned from his firm before any charges were filed. His resignation letter, according to a colleague who later spoke to my daughter, arrived the same afternoon the firm was notified of the investigation. My wife was ultimately charged with 7 counts, including forgery, financial elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Financial elder abuse is a specific category under Ohio law, and the circumstances of her case, the manufactured evidence of cognitive decline, the systematic asset transfers, the preparation to seek guardianship, placed it squarely in that territory. She took a plea agreement after 4 weeks of negotiation, 40 months, suspended to 24 with intensive supervision and full restitution, plus a criminal record that will follow her for the rest of her life. Her lawyer called it a favorable outcome. I did not have a word for it at the time. The civil proceedings restructured everything. I received the house. I received the restored retirement accounts, minus what had already been spent, the deficit of which would be covered by the restitution payments. The home equity balance was assigned to her as debt. Alimony was denied. The court's language in denying it was specific and direct in a way that I found, in a complicated and not entirely comfortable way, satisfying. The man from the financial services firm was eventually charged separately, pled to a reduced count, paid a substantial fine, and, from what I understand, moved out of state. My daughter drove up from Denver the weekend after the final divorce order was signed. We sat on the back porch of the house, the one I had built the deck on 20 years ago when the wood was fresh and I was in my 40s and the future seemed straightforward and long. She had a glass of wine. I had a cup of coffee. It was a Saturday in October, the kind that Ohio does well. All cold, light, and turning leaves. I asked her how she had carried it for 14 months without telling me. She was quiet for a moment. She turned her glass in her hands. "It was the hardest thing I have ever done," she said. "There were nights I wanted to just tell you everything and let you deal with it however you dealt with it." She paused. "But I knew how you would deal with it. You would have confronted her the same night. You would have been honest about everything you knew, because that is how you are." and she would have been ready. She had been ready for years. I stared at the yard. The oak tree I planted the year my son was born was enormous now. Strange to look at something you planted and realize it has been growing quietly the whole time you were distracted by everything else. You should not have had to do that alone, I told her. That was too much to put on yourself. You put 31 years into this family, she said. Into the house and the retirement and the kids' college funds and everything else. She looked at me. You think I was going to let her walk away with it because the timing was inconvenient for me? I did not know what to say. I am 63 years old and I have learned, slowly and at great cost, that there are moments when there is nothing to say that is equal to what you are feeling. So I just said her name, and she leaned her head against my shoulder the way she did when she was small, and we sat there on the deck until the sun moved behind the trees and the coffee went cold. I have thought a great deal about the memory episode since all of this came to light. The conversations I could not recall. The confusion that started to make me genuinely afraid in the quiet hours of early morning that something was wrong with me. I will never know with complete certainty which of those moments were manufactured and which were ordinary lapses that happen to men in their 60s. Probably both. But I know that at a time when I was already anxious about aging, someone I trusted was systematically using that anxiety as a construction material, building something with my fear, brick by careful brick. That is perhaps what I find hardest to set down when I try to account for all of it. Not the money, not even the relationship with the man from the financial firm, though that carries its own weight. It is the deliberateness of the cognitive campaign, the patience it required. The willingness to look at a person you had shared a life with and see in his ordinary human vulnerability something to be exploited. I do not spend much time on it now. I have learned, imperfectly and with practice, to put it down when it gets too heavy. I still live in the house. I thought about selling it and ultimately decided that it was mine, that I had built it in every sense that mattered, and that leaving it would feel too much like a concession to something that had already taken too much. I repainted the living room in November, a color my daughter picked out on a video call, holding paint chips up to her phone camera while I squinted at the screen and pretended I could tell the difference. I retired fully after the proceedings concluded. I had semi-retired before the divorce was filed, but there had been a period where I considered going back to the firm in some consulting capacity because I was not sure what the financial picture would look like when everything was settled. It settled well enough. Not what it would have been without 3 years of quiet attrition, but well enough that I can live without counting things. I walk every morning now. 3 miles, same route, along a path near a reservoir about a mile from the house. I started it as physical therapy for a knee that had been complaining for years, and I have kept it because it is the best part of my day. It is mine in a way that is hard to describe to someone who has not spent years feeling like the ground under them was not quite level. My son and I talked for a long time after the proceedings closed. He is 32 now, lives in Pittsburgh, works in hospital administration. He and I were not as close as my daughter and I, not for any dramatic reason, just geography and personality and the way men in our family sometimes need distance to feel comfortable. We are closer now. The difficulty of the last year shook something loose between us in a way that has turned out, unexpectedly, to be good. He asked me once what I would say to his mother if I had the chance. Not angry, just curious. The way his generation sometimes approaches things that earlier generations would have packed away without examination. I thought about it for a long time. I told him I did not know. That I had started several letters and abandoned them all. That I had things I wanted to say that were about anger, and things I wanted to say that were about grief, and things I wanted to say that were about the specific confusion of looking back at 32 years and not knowing which parts were real and which parts were performance. I told him that every time I tried to put any of it into words, it came out wrong, either too bitter or too resigned, and I had eventually concluded that some things do not have a right way to be said. They just have to be carried. He nodded at that. Said he thought that was probably true. There is one more thing. 4 months ago, I got a call from a woman I had met through a mutual friend at a dinner the previous spring. We had talked for a while that evening, about nothing in particular, about where we had grown up and what kind of work we had done and whether the bread at the restaurant was as good as it thought it was. She was 60, recently widowed, a retired high school principal with opinions about local politics and a very good memory for bad jokes. She made me laugh twice in the span of an hour, which at that point in my life felt like a small miracle. She called to ask if I wanted to have coffee sometime. I said yes. I said it without overthinking it, which for me is unusual enough to be worth noting. We have had coffee 3 times since then. We have also had dinner once at a Thai place downtown that she had been recommending to people for years. She was right about the restaurant. The conversation was easy in a way I had forgotten conversation could be. Not because there was nothing underneath it, but because there was nothing hidden underneath it. And those are, I have come to understand, very different things. I have not told her everything. We are not there yet, and there is no hurry. But she knows I was married a long time, that the marriage ended badly, that I have a daughter in Denver and a son in Pittsburgh and a deck that needs restaining in the spring. She told me she appreciated that I did not seem bitter. I laughed at that, because I think on any accurate accounting I have more than adequate reason to be bitter, and choosing not to be is a daily exercise rather than a natural state. But I meant it when I said it. And I think she knew I meant it. My daughter called me last Sunday, which is when she usually calls, early enough that I am still on the second cup of coffee and the day has not picked up enough speed to require anything of me yet. She asked about the woman I had been having coffee with, because I had mentioned it the previous week in a way designed to be casual and had apparently not succeeded. She sounds nice, my daughter said. She is, I said. Are you going to see her again? I'm seeing her Thursday. Silence. Then, the kind of laugh that means someone is genuinely happy rather than just politely so. Good, Dad. Yeah, I said. I think so too. We talked for another half hour about other things. About her job and a hiking trip she was planning and a book we had both read and disagreed about in the specific pleasurable way that we have always disagreed about books. When we said goodbye, I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment before setting it down. Outside, the trees were bare the way Ohio trees are in November, all structure and no softness, every branch visible against a gray sky. There is something I have always found honest about that. The tree does not pretend. It just stands there, exactly what it is, and waits. I have been thinking about what I would say to anyone who is watching this and recognizes something in it, not necessarily the specific circumstances, but the shape of it. The slow discovery, the things that seemed like small confusions, turning out to be something else entirely. The moment of finding out, and not knowing whether to be more devastated by what happened or by how long it had been happening while you were looking the other direction. What I would say is this. Pay attention to your own financial picture. Not because you should be suspicious of your partner, but because a marriage works best when both people understand what they have and where it is. We never talked about money in any real way. I handled it. She let me handle it and then used my handling of it as cover for what she was doing. If either of us had been more honest about the accounts, more open, more mutual, I do not know that she could have gone as far as she did. And I would say, if the people who love you come to you with concern, take it seriously. My daughter came home because something felt wrong. I was glad to see her and did not ask enough questions. The people who show up when you do not expect them are sometimes showing up for reasons you do not yet understand. And I would say, though this part is harder to say, 63 is not too late. Not for anything, as far as I can tell. Not for starting over or for being angry and then putting the anger down or for sitting on a deck in October with someone who loves you for no reason other than that you are her father and she decided, 3 years before she had to spend 14 months of her life making sure the truth came out. She did not have to do that. She chose to. I asked her once, toward the end of that Saturday on the porch, if she ever regretted it. The long secret, the weight of it. She thought about it in the way she thinks about things, taking the question seriously in a way that I recognize as something she got from me. I regret that it was necessary, she said. I don't regret a single day of it. I told her I loved her. She said she knew. It was enough. If you watched all the way to here, I appreciate you. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that it is possible to lose almost everything and still find your way back to something real. And remember this: the truth has a way of coming out eventually. Make sure you're standing on the right side of it when it does.